what's going on? I am Gregg Sussman, joined today by Jim Sannes, who's here to break down the Daytona 500 this Sunday. What's happening, Jim?
We are doing all good, Greg. Last night's qualifying races weren't too wonky, but they did give us some really good studs starting further back, which is exactly what you want for Daytona. So I am feeling good, feeling ready. It's Valentine's Day, so we're all good here. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm sure your fiance is going to be pumped when you're watching the Daytona 500 and the XFL and golf all weekend. So things will be well in the Sannes household, I'm sure.
Absolutely. You know, last year we actually got engaged during the Daytona 500 last year, so I will make some sacrifices, but hopefully I can get some leeway this year to make up for it and watch it this time around.
Now, if you're a married man, you won't. Let's begin with your favorite play in DFS this week at the Daytona 500. And it's one of the favorites. It's Kyle Busch, who's $14,000 on FanDuel. Why are you going in on Kyle Busch?
Yeah, in general, for tracks like Daytona, what you want to do is you want to target drivers who are starting further back because there aren't a lot of laps to be led, and it's very easy to pass on these tracks. So our mindset in general is going to be we want to target drivers starting further back, and Kyle Busch allows us to do so without sacrificing quality because he is starting 28th of this race, but I would agree he's still one of the favorites to win this race. He had a really fast car in both the Clash last week, got wrecked there, and then was fast in the dual race last night as well, but then got shuffled outside of the pack and couldn't quite make up that ground before the end of the race. Now, Kyle Busch has never won the Daytona 500, but he's won pretty much everything else you can win in Daytona. So he is a good driver on this track. Just hasn't won this specific race. Came very close last year, finished second there behind his teammate Denny Hamlin, who we'll talk about in just 1 second. Joe Gibbs Racing 1, 2, 3 in that race, and they've won 2 of the past 3 races at Daytona. So the equipment's good, the driver's good, the starting position is great. I think that Kyle Busch is the #1 guy you lock in for cash games and a great play for tournaments as well. He's very expensive, but you can make it work with some of the value plays we'll discuss later on. So Kyle Busch really a no-brainer for me for the Daytona 500.
Kyle Busch belongs in your lineup, so don't overthink this cash game tournament. Doesn't matter. Get Kyle Busch in there. Up next, Denny Hamlin's always a threat at the Daytona 500. He's expensive, though. Jim, why are you putting him in your lineup?
Yeah, the defending champ of the Daytona 500 last year got the win, which was his second Daytona 500 win. He also won in 2016, and he kind of just has a knack for avoiding trouble at these tracks, and his car is good enough to allow him to capitalize on that when he is around at the end. And he talked about that this year, how he has kind of like a sense for when the big wreck is going to happen. He'll pedal things back, get out of the way, let the crash happen around him, and then continue on his way. And that does show in the data too, which means he's probably due for some crashing regression. But hey, we'll certainly take it here because he's starting back in 21st, which means he's going to get you good place differential upside. He still has the ability to win the race, so checks a lot of the same boxes as Kyle Busch, and we saw how fast his car was despite being super banged up in the Busch Clash on Sunday. He was able to push his teammate Eric Jones to win, even though both their cars were bad. I think Joe Gibbs Racing has some super fast cars for this weekend, and I can get 2 Joe Gibbs cars starting further back who have that upside that we do like for place differential. And Denny Hamlin, again, like Kyle Busch, can win from here. I think you can stack these 2 guys together, and if they decide to link up late in the race, you're going to be sitting pretty from a DFS perspective. And there's a lot of value here as well. So affording both Hamlin and Busch in the same lineup, not that hard to do. I'll be looking to do so this weekend because both those guys have the ability to win and are starting further back. That's exactly what you want for Daytona.
Denny Hamlin, the defending champ, starting a little farther back. Joe Gibbs Racing, the cars are ready to rock this week. They're running fast. Can Hamlin do it again? Well, he belongs in your lineup, just in case he does. Another rider that's worth putting in there this week is Ryan Blaney, who's priced at $11,000. Why is the Blaine train in the lineup?
Because he's got to win me money at some point. I have been on Ryan Blaney in the Busch Clash on Sunday, and he wrecked. I was on him for the dual races last night. He wrecked again. So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. There is no thing for fool me 3 times. So we're going to run it back with Ryan Blaney one more time and see what happens. Because of that crash in the dual race last night, he is starting back in 27th. That's really good. It also means he's going to a backup car, so he will physically be starting this race even further back. But from a place differential perspective, he is starting 27th, and that is a good number. If you look at, I have a model for each race, and before the dual races, Ryan Blaney actually ranked second behind Joey Logano as being the best driver overall. I think that's overrating him a bit, but He is in really good equipment with Penske Racing. He has done well in Daytona in the past, almost won here, finished second a couple years ago, then led 118 laps 2 years ago. So he's used that equipment well and can run up front. And he's got a lot of really good teammates in this race, including Joey Logano, starting all the way up in third spot. He's a really good driver, really good equipment, starting further back, and he's a little bit cheaper than Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin as well. So if you can't quite talk yourself into the value plays at least as much as I can. I can understand trying to save some salary going down to Ryan Blaney. But if you also want to get crazy, you can fit Blaney, Hamlin, and Busch all in the same lineup. So I am looking to go a little bit top heavy this weekend and go in stars and scrubs. Ryan Blaney fits with that, and hopefully he does not continue to drain my bankroll as he has done so far during speed weeks.
All right, Ryan Blaney, who's cost Jim way too much money over the years and certainly this season. Maybe this is the time. He's had some success at Daytona. Can this be the one where he finally wins it all? Well, we'll find out on Sunday. Up next, as we get a little bit cheaper here, Jim, we get into Clint Bowyer, who this week is priced at $9,000 at Daytona. This is kind of the end of our higher price guys. Why are we kind of stopping the buck here with Bowyer?
Yeah, this range is really bad. There are a lot of drivers in this range who are starting further up, and that's not what we want for Daytona, especially for guys who are a little bit cheaper because it means their odds of winning are lower. You can tolerate a guy up front if he can win. Not a lot of guys here can do that, though, but Clint Bowyer is kind of like this shining star because he's starting all the way back in 29th. That is the lowest any starting position for any driver on a top-end team in this entire race. And it makes it pretty easy to buy into Clint Bowyer. He was with Stewart Haas Racing, and he's in a Ford. Those are two things that I really do value for this race because the Fords have looked good. And the other thing I like about Clint Bowyer is he can sometimes be an odd duck, and he likes to hang out in the back and try to avoid calamity. And, you know, at a place like Phoenix or Homestead or whatever, that's not a good thing. That's not what you want. But in Daytona, I want my drivers to finish the race. And it's hard to finish the race if you wreck. So I kind of like it when guys like Clint Bowyer hang out in the back. And I would not be shocked if he does so during Sunday's race. So if you use Clint Bowyer and you see that he's hanging out in 30th and you're kind of confused, maybe annoyed with me, hold off, be patient, because he will charge when it does matter. Got the horsepower to get it done when he wants to move forward and try to win this race. And he does fit a balance approach really well. Again, I'm going to try to go a bit more top heavy. So I may not wind up on Clint Bowyer as often as I wind up on guys like Ryan Blaney and Kyle Busch, but dollar for dollar, Clint Bowyer is probably one of the best plays in this entire field. Really good equipment, starting far at the back. He's got good experience. He's a good driver on these drafting tracks. So Clint Bowyer is someone I definitely want to target if I wind up in this mid-range on Sunday.
It's not exactly easy here this week with a guy like Clint Bowyer, and as we get cheaper into our FanDuel lineups. But Bowyer does make some sense, as Jim described, for the Daytona 500. So if you want to take a shot on Clint Bowyer, well, it could be worth it. Now let's get really cheap here, Jim, as we got to save some money in order to get the Kyle Busch's and Denny Hamlins in there. And that begins with Ryan Preece. He's $5,500. Why do you think he has a shot here on Sunday?
Yeah, I've spent the past couple of weeks talking of Chris Buescher a lot because Chris Buescher is a guy in new equipment, and he had done well in Daytona in the past. Well, the guy taking over in Buescher's new car, he was Buescher's teammate last year, but now moving to Buescher's old car, is Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece is starting all the way back in 31st, but we know he has the equipment to get the job done here because Chris Buescher did so in the past. We saw Ryan Preece finish 8th year last year as well, and his teammate Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is on the pole for this race. So the engine under the hood is really good, which makes us feel good about Ryan Preece. And Preece showed some talent as well in Talladega, so it seems like drafting tracks do suit him pretty well. So I think that things line up here pretty well. If I were to outline one knock on Ryan Preece for this race, it is that he's driving a Chevy. As mentioned, the Chevys have new bodies for this year, and they haven't shown the ability to bump draft all that well. That's a little bit concerning. We did see William Byron and Jimmy Johnson finish first and second in last night's second duel race, so that's definitely good. But I do have some overall concerns about Chevys for this race. But the good thing with Ryan Preece is that he's starting all the way back in 31st, which does help you quite a bit. He has a good engine. I think that's helpful as well. We don't need him to win to pay off, which lowers my concerns around him being in a Chevy. So Ryan Preece starting super far back. We do have that concern about the Chevy, but that starting far back gives him a lot of upside, and I think that he does have the equipment to get the job done, as he has shown in the past as well. So a little bit of risk with Preece for sure, because he's not on a top flight team, but I do like the upside, and I do like the fact that he's proven he can do well here in the past as well.
There is upside with Ryan Preece, and there is the history, but with the lack of confidence in his team, I think there are question marks with Preece, but that's okay. It's $5,500. You're not breaking the bank for him. Worth a shot in the Daytona 500. One last driver to get to, Jim, and that brings us to Michael McDowell. He's the cheapest player, or cheapest driver, rather, in your lineup here this week. He's $5,000. Why are you taking the shot on McDowell?
Yeah, it's another guy with a proven history at Daytona, and I think that's really valuable because he is an Ford, which I definitely like, but also, as mentioned, he has done it in the past. He's starting back in 26th. That's a good number from a starting position perspective, and he enters this race with 4 top 10s in his past 7 Daytona races. He has finished outside the top 15 just once, and if you get a top 15 out of a driver in this salary range who is starting back in 26th, that's going to give you a really good advantage for this race because it allows you to afford really high upside guys like Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin. You don't need this guy to win the race for him to be a good DFS play. And I think that's a pretty big luxury for Michael McDowell. He should get help from other Ford drivers if he does work his way to the front, as we've seen him do in the past. And he's actually helped push people to wins before as well. So the equipment is not great for Michael McDowell, but the driver is. And I think that's valuable for a guy starting back in 26. Now, if you want to get really wild and want to jam in like all the studs we discussed before, Brendan Gaughan is $2,500. He is starting 39th. He is the second to last driver in this race, but pretty fast in qualifying. He actually earned his way into the race on qualifying alone, and he's done well at Daytona and Talladega in the past. So if you want to get really wild, which I will want to do every now and then for this weekend for sure, Brendan Gaughan makes sense at $2,500. But if you want to play it a little bit safer, get access to those Fords, get access to better equipment, I think Michael McDowell is a really solid option at $5,000.
I think you want to do both, right? I think you want to be conservative and play it safe, but also take some of that risk. And I think that's what McDowell is, right? It's not as crazy as paying $2,500 for a guy, but the upside may not be as high either. I think there's 2 different mindsets. You want to do a little bit of both in order for you to be successful on Sunday at the Daytona 500. Jim, we appreciate the time. Good luck this weekend. I'm sure this Daytona 500 probably won't be as good as your last one.
No, probably not, but that's okay. I can accept that for sure. Hopefully it'll be a profitable one for DFS to make up for the engagement last year. So we'll see how that goes, but appreciate it, Greg. I hope you have a great Valentine's Day weekend, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good, my man. I'll talk to you next week for sure. Enjoy the Daytona 500. Enjoy the XFL. Enjoy your weekend. For Jim Sonis, I'm Gregg Sussman. We'll see you back here next week for another edition of the FanDuel Hurry Up.